I thought I had a pretty clear idea of how the world works. Not everything in the world, but just the basics of life. I was wrong. It started to change when I came across something that looked fairly innocuous. And pretty stupid, actually. Hold on a second. Let me give you some background. So, this is me, working on the movie that you're watching right now. I started researching and filming this in college, when I was 20. I made it more important than anything else I did. I didn't do my homework or go out much. This just had to be made into a film. But I didn't have much time, or money, so I worked at Disney World and Starbucks and a museum, and put all of my money toward the film. Last year, at 22, when I was about to leave for law school, I decided to postpone it and move in with my dad for a year to finish the movie. Of course, I didn't know how to make a movie, but I did make some new friends along the way who helped me out by holding the camera. Like a PhD candidate named Alex.
I can hear me pretty well in my headphones.
And a fellow psychology student named Alana. Sometimes they just sat and watched. So anyway, back to the movie.
Hey, friend, what do you say? How many bears are killed today?
I've been naked in Florida, Arizona, Las Vegas.
Oh, should I Google your name? Are you naked on the internet also?
Yes, I am.
I visited a few more of these animal rights events.
Boycott the Ringling Brothers.
A blog entry by a former Ringling clown.
A former clown?
It's called Why I Put Down the Red Nose.
I decided to find out the purpose of all this. There were lots of different organizations putting together these events, so I started with the most prominent one, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. The co-founder and president of PETA is Ingrid Newkirk. So I went down to the PETA headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia, to see if I could talk with Ingrid. I found the person who probably spends the most time around her.
You're Ingrid Newkirk.
Executive assistant.
What is that exactly?
I plan everything for her and pretty much her right-hand person at PETA.
Where is Ingrid Newkirk's office, by the way? Is it at the top?
Mm-hmm.
It's like all the way at the top. She sits at the top.
She does.
Has she always sat at the top?
I have no idea.
So you had to move to Norfolk.
Yeah, I wanted to move to Norfolk. I was planning on moving here anyway.
I just had to convince her to take me to the right place.
This is our international grassroots campaign. This is IT web production. This is corporate affairs. What does marketing do? They help design our campaigns, figure out how to best market it to the audience that the campaign is for.
There are a lot of animals here.
Mm-hmm. This is actually our communications department.
Is there a reason Pamela Anderson got chosen for the communications department?
I think she was stalling because when she ran out of departments, she even showed me the mailroom.
This is our mailroom department.
Then I found Ingrid.
You have to make something provocative or controversial or gimmicky or sexual for everyone to stop from their busy lives and turn around and have a look.
And this is Bruce Friedrich. Bruce is PETA's Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs.
And there are some things that we've discussed doing that we've ruled out on the basis of a fear that they might go too far.
Like what?
But I can't think of anything offhand.
Another vice president, Dan Matthews, is a little different from Bruce and Ingrid.
Well, I actually was invited to this MTV party in Miami by Andy Dick, who was going to be a presenter. And that one weekend alone, I was at one party and met Reverend Al Sharpton.
Hello, I'm Reverend Al Sharpton with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
And that same weekend in Miami, I was at a hip-hop club with a drag queen, and I thought we were going to be attacked. And we ended up, the drag queen ended up knowing Dennis Rodman. I asked him to be the first athlete pose in our Rather Go Naked Than Wear Fur campaign. It's the women that get a lot more attention because people are more fascinated by a naked woman than a naked man, except for me, of course, because I'm gay.
When you do something controversial, you create conversation, and conversation is a good thing. Discussion is a good thing. And someone may dismiss PETA and say, oh, well, that group, they do all these silly things. But you know, what they're saying has some merit to it.
Okay, they are good at getting public attention, but the intensity at this place was surreal. I had to ask, what are they getting all this attention for?
A lot of people who are basically intelligent, who are living upstanding lives.
Basically.
I mean, they're the intelligent people who are making good livings, who are politically aware, and they just have absolutely no idea of what's happening on factory farms or what's happening in vivisection labs. They just have no idea.
Factory farms? So I decided to go get an idea. I left PETA behind and visited the offices of Compassion Over Killing, an organization that does undercover investigations into the egg industry.
They noticed that when they started putting all these birds so confined, intensely confined in cages, that the birds would, out of frustration, start pecking at each other. Birds have a natural pecking order that most people are aware of. So in acting out this pecking order, if a bird who's on the lower end of the pecking scale can't get away, she keeps getting pecked at and pecked at and pecked at. So to prevent that, they started debeaking birds, overcrowding, injuries and illness, dead birds, and any egg farm that you will visit, you will find.
How can I prove you're not lying?
You can go to an egg farm yourself.
Well, this has got to be the farm. The eggs.
Mm-hmm. Look at the chickens flying around all over there.
What the hell are they doing?
I don't want to get arrested. If they tell us they're going to call the cops, we'll say, okay, we'll leave, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God! As
Oh
soon
my
as I
God!
open the door, it smells terrible.
Oh, holy shit! It does.
Okay, just follow me. We'll see if there's anyone over there we can talk to. Hello, how are you? Good. Maybe we're in the wrong place. We're looking for an egg farm.
This is it.
Oh, we're trying to find. We're trying to, disprove all of those people who say that there's something wrong with, like, the treatment of animals on the egg farms and stuff.
You need to talk to John and
You know what I mean? I went to look for John and Linda, and I think we found Linda. Oh. Hi. Okay, we were looking for the right person. This is my shirt for it.
You cannot come onto our property.
Huh?
You cannot come onto our property.
And at all? Was there any way that maybe if we tell you beforehand we can come back and visit? Oh.
We don't let anyone in our chicken houses.
Oh, well, is there a reason? Is there some way? Because what we're trying to do is disprove the people who say that there's something wrong with the treatment of animals, that it's bullshit, you know what I mean? So is there anything that we could do kind of to show that? Maybe we could visit, or maybe we can give you the camera, you can come in?
No. I mean, I don't know who you are.
Okay.
You know, that we just don't let strangers on our property, especially taking pictures.
Okay.
We don't mistreat our chickens.
Like how big are the cages?
The cages are fairly large.
So about how big for number of chickens?
I don't know.
This
it's
for
my husband's deal.
Oh, so you haven't seen the cages?
I've been in there, but I couldn't tell you the measurements. And we have different size cages. But they have plenty of room.
Maybe a guess?
I can't even guess, because I don't know.
Okay. Huh. So what about that slicing the beak thing? That's not true either, right?
They do that so the chicken doesn't kill off the other chicken in the cage.
Oh. I took my I Heart Eggs shirt back off and walked back to the car where we found some guys taking down our license plate number. And they said, oh yeah, it's okay if you park here. No, okay, yeah. May I ask you just really fast, just personally, what you think of like all the people who are claiming, we're trying to prove them wrong, who are claiming that, okay. Yeah, here, we'll just hold it in your hand, down. But anyway, all of the people who are like claiming that that the animals are really abused on farms and so forth.
Do you believe that?
I don't, and I want to prove it wrong. Like, how do we prove it wrong? Like, what do you say to the people who say, oh, they're in tiny cages and they can't, they can't stretch their wing and so forth?
It's based on science, isn't it? And studies. A lot of universities are studying. There's whole curriculums now on animal welfare.
He's right, there are whole curriculums on animal welfare, but it looks like they were being developed precisely because of all of the attention being brought to animal welfare problems.
The ability to experience pain is probably something that emerged early in the evolution of animals.
So being able to experience pain is not even close to being uniquely human.
Oh, far from it, no. It's probably almost universal in anything that has a nervous system.
Then I visited Dr. Mark Beckoff, a well-known expert on animal emotions. He lives somewhere in the mountains in Colorado.
Well, I started a lot of my lectures saying, does anybody here think that dogs don't feel joy? And even at scientific meetings, no hands go up. Nobody in their right mind can think that dogs don't feel joy or that chimpanzees don't grieve. And the neurobiology and the ethology support that. The limbic system is the part of the brain that's important in processing emotions. And all mammals have it, and it's structurally pretty much the same, and also the same neurochemicals.
So animals seem to be capable of experiencing physical sensations, are capable of experiencing emotions. It can't possibly be as intense as human physical sensations or human emotions.
It may be more intense because, for example, I can rationalize my fears.
Animal emotions could be even more intense than human emotions, because we like to say that they're unfiltered.
Human emotions are what drive our entire lives, and intense emotions, that's what life is, practically.
Right.
So if you're saying that other members of other species can experience emotions maybe even more intensely than humans, what does that mean?
Well, it means that we grossly underestimate the extent to which animals may be suffering. From an ethical standpoint, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt, just as we would if we came across a human being with whom we had no means of verbal communication. Most of the animals that you eat are living in nondescript, very large sheds that look like a bit like warehouses. They're windowless, so you can't see into them, and they contain thousands upon thousands of animals.
I'm an undercover investigator. My job is to document the conditions on factory farms. My identity is concealed because if my identity is revealed, it pretty much ensures that I can never do another investigation. The industry guidelines, the university studies, the industry magazines are very clear about what the standards are. They tell you exactly how the animals are treated. But until you see the footage, it's hard to understand what that really means. I can show you the footage from these investigations so that when you talk to these experts, you can see what they're talking about.
The thing that moved me most in factory farming is egg farming. You have anything from 3 to 5 birds in a cage, and the amount of space allocated for them means that they really can't do anything. They're just compressed into that space. Their feet get damaged from standing on the wire all the time.
They're actually standing on wires in these cages, and they have no way of getting out of these cages. For how long?
Well, the lifespan of the average battery chicken is less than 2 years.
But years in these cages?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They're coming from hatcheries where 50% are female, and they're put in the egg farm, and 50% are going to be killed because they are of no use to the industry. I've seen and read reports about birds being suffocated, these male chicks being just tossed alive in dumpsters, being macerated, like literally ground up like in a massive blender and just ground up, just thrown in there.
It's hard to believe that we can do this stuff to animals at some level. It's just so relentlessly callous.
I wanted to actually meet some of these animals, so we drove to a sanctuary for animals who've been rescued from factory farms. But we had some trouble getting in.
You're more familiar with gates than I am?
No, I'm familiar with this rope.
Oh,
My dad's
really?
a contractor.
Oh, okay.
This is too tight. This is too tight to loosen it, so you need to undo it here.
Okay.
And I might have to call my dad to ask him how to do this, though.
Really?
Yeah, these things are intense.
No, I think we're on the wrong side, Alana. I think it's over there.
Oh!
I think you just unlatch it.
You're right.
Yeah, it's over there.
Haha!
It's a good thing, because we probably would have taken their fence out.
Every single bird here has a name. Every single bird has a personality. and their very own personality. Like some of them are shy, some of them like to be petted, some of them like to be held. She had lived all her life in a battery cage. She's very sweet. She'll eat food out of your hand. We give her treats like canned corn and grapes.
I asked to see a chicken who had been raised to be eaten rather than for eggs.
She can't walk at all, really. And she has a best friend, Sylvia, over here. They like to do everything together. She was crying a little bit because I pulled her out and Sylvia was still in the barn.
Chickens account for over 95% of the animals raised for food in the United States. That means there are over 1 billion, that's 1,000 million, on United States factory farms at any given moment. Thousands are kept in a single shed.
Because they're in such large numbers and so densely stocked, they tend to pick on each other, they tend to peck each other. They have been selected to eat lots and lots of food and grow very rapidly, so they put on weight extremely quickly. Essentially, they're putting on weight before their bones are fully hardened, so they're still very young, they have soft bones. And what happens then is that where the joints of the bones join, you get abrasion, you get arthritis, osteoarthritis forming. The birds then become lame, progressively more and more lame, till eventually some of them can't walk at all. They can't.
Why do they become lame or can't walk? Because it's so painful?
Because of the pain in the joints, yes. Some of them can't even walk. I mean, they just sit on the ground.
Just because of
the pain.
I thought to myself, if they can feel physical pain like we can, what is it really like to be in pain all the time?
My neck and back were broken in several places. My left hip was pulled from its socket, and many of the nerves in that area were literally shredded.
This is my father. His injury was years ago, but he always refused to talk about it. Until now.
I feel pain in both feet, as if they were in a vice being crushed. I feel pain in all the fingers of my left hand, which is why I squeeze them constantly to try to get the pain out. I feel pain in my lower back, as if I were being pushed up against the wall. If all these years had not passed and I suddenly felt this pain, I'd be screaming maniacally. When you cut your finger and you feel that terrible, excruciating pain, the world disappears. The world is gone. Now you've only cut your little pinky, and it's a tiny, tiny little cut that in a matter of moments will be gone. But for the moment that you feel that pain, the world is gone. All you feel is that terrible, terrible pain. It's the only universe, the only world you have, and it's all yours, and you're locked in, and everybody else is gone. The problem is when you feel that type of pain endlessly, and you can't escape it. It begins to transform who you are. You begin to lose whatever special thing there is within us that makes life worth living.
This building here is our pig barn. The pigs have a 4-acre pasture that they roam around on. They have a big creek that they can wallow in. They have grass to eat. They graze just like cows and horses do.
It's no coincidence that most of these pigs are from North Carolina. It has some of the highest concentrations of pig farms anywhere. But when I started researching North Carolina pig farms, almost everything I found was about environmental problems, as if there's something crazy going on down there. So we took the long drive down, but we were definitely heading in the right direction.
I think this is a pig truck.
And what you're seeing here are all the environmental impact statements and studies that have been done relative to the river.
I visited the offices of the Neuse Riverkeeper Foundation, which was founded to fight sources of pollution in the Neuse River and other rivers. One of the main people involved with all this is Rick Dove.
I spent 25 years in the United States Marine Corps. I'm very proud of my military service. I was in Vietnam twice.
Another is Larry Baldwin.
I come from a fairly rural community, so had some understanding of what's going on with the hogs and how those things are done in the Maryland area. But of course, it's nothing like what we have here in North Carolina.
Rick really doesn't appreciate people thinking that concern about animals and the environment is a cause for the political left.
I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative, and I believe in my country. Everybody gets up in the morning and they eat their bacon as if there's no problem out in the world, in the countryside. There's a tremendous problem. The bacon isn't being raised on family farms anymore. It's being raised in factory farms where animals never see the light of day, where they go from the size of your fist to 250 pounds in 5 months. You can drive down any highway in North Carolina, anywhere in eastern North Carolina, almost one after the other. You're going to see hog farm, hog farm, hog farm. There's going to be confinement buildings, and there's going to be this huge cesspool that they call a lagoon. And no pretty girls in bathing suits here. This is a cesspool. They give it a name, a lagoon, but it's a cesspool. It's full of basically untreated animal waste. The only treatment it gets is it sits and ferments inside that cesspool. When that cesspool fills up, they take it out and they spread it and spray it through the air on these fields. If there's a wind blowing, it's going to mist off and it's going to go off the fields. But even when they spray it on the fields, all these fields have ditches cut through them to take the excess liquids that are sprayed on them and get them off the field to keep the field drained. All of those ditches lead to rivers, wetlands, streams, and creeks.
There are people still in this area who have lived here all their lives. They're afraid to get in this water. They're afraid to actually come in contact with it because they don't know if
they won't even touch it.
They won't even get in. They don't want to touch the water. We have communities who are in close proximity to these facilities where their groundwater is contaminated. They can't drink. They can't take their water from their wells.
When they spray it on the fields, you can actually see this stuff just misting off the fields if there's any wind. You can see it just going off the fields, and the people that live in these communities, they complain about this hog waste being sprayed on them, their houses, their cars. Of course they do.
We've got issues with airborne contaminants from these facilities. Dr. Stephen Wing with UNC is doing studies on some of the middle schools.
Children who attend schools where the school staff report that livestock odor comes into the school building twice or more per month. We found that children attending those schools had about a 25% higher reported prevalence of asthma symptoms, things like wheezing. They also reported more doctor-diagnosed asthma.
If you really want to see what's going on in eastern North Carolina, then you need to get yourself in an airplane at 1,000 feet, and you need to fly over these farms.
Left hand here, step only on the black on the wing.
Okay.
That's it.
Can I just sit on the top?
You may. That's where you want to fly.
You know what? I'll just take it without you.
Okay, fine. How about it? By the way, you get the mortgage too.
It's a little bumpy today, a little windy today, so it's going to be a little uncomfortable.
Are there pretzels?
What we're looking at out the window of the airplane at this point is a typical hog farm. These lagoons can be the size of a football field and just hold millions of gallons of waste. Look how close we are to the houses underneath here. Hey Dennis, we're spraying. We're spraying just under your wing. And these are people's houses right close by.
Do people know about this?
Not really.
You know, really the best story on what happens to the people who live in the community comes from the people who live in the community.
So I'll just go talk to them.
Yeah, you should.
You want me to just...
That's what you
go
should
talk
do. Yeah.
Where's your well?
Right behind your car. That little building up there is where the shallow well is at. We have the...
That's where all of your water comes from?
Right. That spring is less than 30 feet deep.
And they're spraying the fields right over there?
Right. I'm going to step right across here. I'm going to show them to you.
Okay.
How close they are.
Is this their land over here?
Their stuff gets on us. I'm going to get on them and show you.
So why do they put all of these bushes here? Is that so
just to hide what they're doing?
So it's those white things.
Sticks
right?
coming up, yeah, and they shoot waste out 20 foot in every direction.
Up in the air?
Up in the air.
It turns
in
into
the mist. Yes. They would have to be pumping, and and the wind coming towards you for you to understand, and words can't explain.
Come over this way. They're just neighbors doing target practice over there shooting. Here, come over this way. I hope they don't just turn on.
Yeah.
Because it's pig shit. These are them. Cool. I don't think we can get much closer. There's a fence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 buildings.
Well, my father is laying in a bed right behind me.
His father, Julian, is dying of cancer and can no longer get away from his home, ever.
I hope they don't never see another hole with a hole for. Because I can't breathe, I can't do nothing. You go down there and if you haven't catch a fish, you know what it tastes like? It ain't no fish no more. You eating shit. Well, I'm having a hard time out there out there.
You've walked outside and fallen down just because of the smell?
No, yeah. You can't breathe, what you gonna do? When you could work on your bike and you can't get out there and do nothing. It's pitiful. Just a piece of meat.
One day, I was going to my hog operation and I stopped at the local store out there where we used to get sandwiches and stuff and make them.
Don Webb used to own a pig farm, but he chose to shut it down.
The airborne ammonias, they had to smell that stinking stuff. They want much of a man here. And I want much of a human being.
The hog industry wants the people and the public to think that they got their old McDonald farm and that these are regular old farm odors that you used to smell. Well, that's anything but the truth. Small farms used to have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20,000 hogs in one spot. And that's from the cesspool out of that hog operation featured behind the spraying.
So what are they spraying?
They're spraying hog feces and urine out of a cesspool.
I'm an American. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an American. And America comes first, not a political party and not a dollar bill. The people in America and the decency and honor that we have toward one another. And to pollute my creek, to pollute my water, to stink up my air is wrong.
Every time they bite into that sausage, they'll help stinking up some American's home with feces and urine from corporate hog farms.
It's happening all over this country, and it's not just pigs, it's chickens, it's turkeys, it's cattle, it's dairy, it's all of these CAFO industries, these confined feeding animal industries that are out there. And what's happening out there is, as I see it, is criminal.
As far as anybody can establish, pigs are easily as intelligent as dogs. They have complex social lives in the wild. They form permanent matriarchal groups. These are pigs that are being raised essentially to be slaughtered for meat, for bacon or whatever. Certain individuals will start to chew on and eat the tails of other individuals. In a wild state, this would never happen. If you chop off the tails, it reduces the prevalence of this tail-biting behavior. But then you've got to chop off a pig's tail when it's a young piglet. Castration is another one of these standard mutilations that goes on everywhere. In pigs, it's done without anesthetic. They use basically a scalpel to slice open the scrotum. The testicles are removed physically. The piglets scream. I mean, they scream blue murder when they're being castrated. We would never do that, for example, to our pet dogs, which we also had castrated. They're under full anesthetic.
Things are beginning to change, but as of this film's release, millions of mother pigs who are used to breed the pigs who are used for food spend their 4-month pregnancies in 7-foot-long, 2-foot-wide stalls called gestation crates.
She's essentially incarcerated all the time, where she can stand up, she can lie down, but she can't turn around. The animals that just become progressively more and more unresponsive to environmental stimuli. It looks like they've given up, basically, as though they don't care anymore. It looks like the same kind of almost catatonic behavior that people with very, very severe depression show. It certainly might be as strong and as intense as it would be with a human being.
Was a staff writer for the New Yorker,
and now I write for the Sunday Times Magazine. Last May I wrote a long piece about being hospitalized for depression and the experience of it. I was in the building, in a depression unit in this building. I think sadness is more tolerable, frankly, as an emotion. I think it's more, I would say much more hopelessness. I don't think one stays in a severe depression for 2 years. I just don't.
You couldn't?
My feeling is you wouldn't last it. Not if it's severe, severe.
How would you not last it?
I think you'd kill yourself.
When it's less hot out, they go out on the pasture?
Oh, yeah. They have friends, and...
Like they have some who are particular friends with particular others?
Yeah, like a lot of times the animals that come in together tend to stay together for the rest of their life. When one of the cows dies, it's a really awful thing for everybody. They mourn their friends, and
the cows who spent time with a particular other cow mourn that cow?
Yeah.
It turns out that cattle raised for beef are the least abused. They spend the first half of their lives on a range, although they do undergo painful mutilations.
I've never witnessed castration in bull calves, so I don't know exactly what is done or the procedure involved.
Presumably you're lucky.
Yes.
Then they're transported to feedlots and fed grains that their stomachs aren't developed to digest.
Factory farm memories. That's good. It looks like the pens in the front are pretty empty, but the ones in the back are filled. Hello, how are you?
Good.
Good. Hi, I'm Mark. Oh, okay. Yeah, turn it off. We were wondering if there's anybody we might be able to speak with about this operation. We didn't know it was here, but...
No.
No one?
Oh, we don't do that stuff here.
Oh. Is there a reason, just because you don't feel like it, or?
It's just something we don't do.
People tried to film before?
Yeah, people have tried. It's just something that we've decided.
Yeah. Just,
Well, there's a big percentage of dairy cows that are in total confinement, and they don't go out on pasture at all. And I've seen a lot of welfare problems. A lot of lameness. Lameness in the national dairy herd right now is 24%.
Lameness meaning like they can't.
Well, they have, lameness, they have difficulty walking, sore feet, sore legs. They walked, but they're limping.
Even worse, I found out that many of them can't walk at all by the time they reach slaughter, because of the high levels of physical stress during their lifetimes. Large numbers also suffer from a painful udder infection called mastitis. One of the symptoms of mastitis is pus and blood ending up in the milk.
Obviously, the bond between mothers and their infants is very strong, not just in humans, but in all mammals. In order to maintain their milk production, we have to let them have a calf from time to time. We don't want them nursing the calves because we want the milk, so the calf is taken away very soon after it's born. And this causes the cow a great deal of distress, and it obviously causes the calf a great deal of distress. Sometimes the calf is put in a little kind of kennel within earshot of the mother, so the mother can hear the calf calling, and the cows will call to the calves. So, there's this back and forth going on, and it's quite distressing to listen to, actually.
Have you heard it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
When animal activist groups put pressure on, it can bring about great reforms, and great reforms have happened.
Well, it was about time to revisit PETA.
When we first started PETA, I don't think I ever envisioned us sitting in a corporate boardroom at a major animal producing company or bringing corporate shareholder resolutions. But of course, because we've done all that persuasion and pushing, what we call the PETA push, then we have seen major changes.
I also went back to speak with Bruce. He's taking a few years off to teach at a public school while getting his master's at Johns Hopkins.
When we campaigned against McDonald's and we convinced McDonald's to turn up the ampage on chicken slaughter, to decrease the number of animals who were fully conscious as they went into the stun bath, when we got them to go from an industry average of 8, but some cages having 11 hens, down to a maximum of 5 hens.
It's still abominable how chickens and pigs and turkeys are treated, but major changes have happened.
We're here at the headquarters of the Humane Society of the United States. We're in Gaithersburg, Maryland.
It's a nice headquarters.
Well, thank you very much. The Humane Society of the United States is the largest animal protection organization in the world. The vast majority of animals who are exploited by human beings are those who are raised for food, and we're trying to alleviate much of their misery by banning some of the most inhumane and cruel practices that these animals endure.
I'm a partner at a corporate law firm. It's a very large law firm. It has about 500 lawyers in it on Wall Street. And I do mergers and acquisitions. That's my day job, as it were, and my night job, but my day and night job. And then I do, while working at that law firm, I do pro bono work. So I represent Farm Sanctuary, I represent some other animal protection groups in the area of farmed animal protection, most specifically. And then I teach animal law at NYU and Columbia Law Schools, and I write. So it's a combination of different things.
That's it?
That's, yeah, just that.
You're one of the few people behind the first major changes in factory farming in the United States.
Yes, that's true. So in the early 2000s, 2002, the state of Florida banned the gestation crate. In 2006, the state of Arizona banned the gestation crate and the veal crate. And in 2008 in California, they banned the gestation crate, veal crate, and battery cage. It's always, I think, exciting to be around when a significant social justice movement really kicks off.
Compared to the decade prior to this past decade, we've seen a major change in terms of farm animals slowly gaining new protections that they didn't have before. Admittedly, there's still a long way to go.
But the industry is also doing something else.
Any group that's effective in taking on an industry, and PETA is taking on at least 5 distinct industries, you are going to come under fire. Those industries are going to really, by any means necessary, try to take you down and attack you and challenge your character. And they have front groups that do that for them.
He seemed to assume I knew what front groups were, so I didn't want to ask him. What are these front groups? What is this whole thing?
A front group is an organization that is funded by corporate interests who don't want to be associated with the ideas that the front group is promoting. They're charitable or social welfare organizations that don't have to disclose their donors. It's generally going to be vicious, attacking sort of ads and websites.
The pork industry will often fight back not by defending gestation crates, but instead by paying front groups to attack the Humane Society of the U.S.
Deliberately deceive people into thinking that a group is engaged in conduct that it's not.
For example, not using their funds properly, or that there's a different true intent behind what they're doing.
Find a small error, they will use that in an attempt to undermine an organization's credibility on every issue.
They'll use name-calling, groups are radical or extreme.
They'll suggest they're irrelevant, or they're complainers, or they're whiners.
You'll see groups being called hypocrites, or you'll see them being called I don't know. I don't even know what else they call us.
Go to the public interest organization's website, see how they respond to those criticisms. But mostly, people have to be skeptical. When you are seeing ads like this, there is likely some big business behind it. So you should think about what industry might have an interest in promoting this position, but doesn't really want you to know that that's what they're up to.
It got me thinking, what if I could go back into the past and speak with these people before they were farmers? Well, there's a place for everything. The Future Farmers of America Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, for people who are going to be farmers in the future.
Do the chicken, Dwayne.
Do the chicken, Dwayne.
Yeah.
There's your chicken. FFA now goes way beyond future farmers, but there were still more than enough present.
Well, everybody thinks it's like cruel that, I mean, we have 9,000 hogs in 2 buildings. There's like 100 pigs per pen. But if it wasn't good for the pigs, like they wouldn't be doing it.
And it also feeds our honor students.
Yes, it does indeed.
Animal legislation that's being pushed, like out in California and all these other places. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm not particularly fond of it. It's all about money when you get down to it. And when it costs more than it gives, then it's not worth having.
So I thought I had it all figured out, and I was about to pack up when Bruce said something very unexpected.
So when you take this idea of might makes right, I can do this to you, and so I'm going to do this to you, the pinnacle of that form of bigotry, the pinnacle of that form of racism, is speciesism.
Wait a second. What? It turns out that there's way more going on behind all this. There's a much deeper philosophical issue. I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, home of the world's largest acorn.
What do you think of it?
It looks good.
And also home of Dr. Tom Reagan, author of the influential book The Case for Animal Rights. Back in New York City, I spoke with Dale Jamieson, director of the Center for Environmental Studies at New York University. Then I went to Washington, D.C. to speak with David DeGrazia, chair of the Department of Philosophy at George Washington University. I also went to Ithaca, New York to speak with Sherry Kolb, a professor at Cornell Law School, and Newark, New Jersey to visit Gary Francione, a professor at Rutgers School of Law.
If we think about what is most clear and certain in ethics, what basic ideas are accepted by all moral systems regardless of their major differences, it's that we shouldn't cause harm without very good reason.
The harm principle basically says everything else being equal, it's wrong to cause harm.
Speciesism is the use of species to exclude certain beings from the moral community who are relevantly similar from members of the moral community, and you base that exclusion on species alone. It's like racism or sexism, where you have relevantly similar individuals, some of whom are in the moral community, some of whom are excluded on the basis of race or sex.
Speciesism, as I understand it, is excluding members of different species from ours from the realm of moral concern just because those individuals are members of other species.
The core idea of speciesism is really the same, or at least analogous to the core idea of sexism and racism, namely that it's a prejudice in favor of one's own kind against others.
Peter Singer is credited with founding animal rights through his 1975 book, Animal Liberation.
There aren't many philosophy books that have been more significant in terms of changing the world and changing people. It's almost impossible to overstate its significance.
He's now professor of bioethics at Princeton University and considered one of the most influential philosophers alive.
I entitled the first chapter of Animal Liberation, All Animals Are Equal. And what I meant by that was that we ought to give them all equal consideration of their interests, whatever their interests might be. That doesn't mean that you give them equal treatment, because they have different interests. As long as they have interests, for example, the interest in not feeling pain, it should be irrelevant whether they're members of the species Homo sapien or Pan troglodytes, the chimpanzee, or Gallus domesticus, the common chicken, or whatever. I mean, what's that got to do with how bad it is for them to feel pain?
Obviously, there's got to be something wrong with their argument. So I did all of my research and made every objection that I could find.
Isn't it just natural for us to use other animals?
Well, the problem with the concept of the natural is that it means many, many different things.
Maybe war is natural. There's a good argument for saying that war is natural to human beings, that we've always done it as long as far back as you can go. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and stop it, that we see the costs of war, we see the suffering it involves, and we do our best to prevent wars.
Rape may be natural. The rape by powerful males may be natural in some sense and biologically adapted, but it's the last thing in the world that could be morally justified.
I couldn't find anyone who thought there was a way to make nature into an ethical argument. Then, finally, I found someone.
Yes, we're still around. The SS never actually died, and the SS is still flourishing. When a man can take a beaten, broken, flattened out country, and in less than 4 years make that country into one of the greatest world powers that there ever was, then most unfortunately we have to overlook a lot of other things, and we have to accept success.
The man overlooking those few things is Lieutenant Snyder. a high-ranking officer in America's Nazi Party. Why should we follow laws of nature?
Nature is smarter than we give nature credit for, when you come right down to it. Nature is a lot wiser than we are. Any kind of deliberate wrongdoing, once I say it, by the laws of nature, should be naturally curbed and stopped permanently. A second time caught in this country illegally should warrant immediate execution.
Okay, I guess that doesn't work. But there must be something special about humans. I mean, we're smarter.
Well, at least most of us are. Babies aren't. The mentally disadvantaged of all ages aren't. If you're going to say that intelligence is a basis for inclusion in the moral community, and you're going to say that non-human primates are more intelligent than some human beings, but they don't belong as members of the moral community, but those human beings do, say, that looks like a contradiction to me.
No, that doesn't work either. How about... Animals have no conception of morality, so why should they be included in it?
Well, infants have no conception of morality.
We don't say of them, that is the babies and those who are seriously mentally disadvantaged, we don't say, well, we're at liberty to do anything we want to them. They must exist for us then.
Damn, they got me again. I started to get pretty desperate. They look completely different from us.
They look different from us, and that doesn't matter at all.
Can't be made into an argument against animal rights?
I don't think so. I don't think looks could matter, just as the elephant man's looking very, very different from other human beings had no relevance to his moral status.
If we are trying to say that humans have some particular quality that distinguishes them as superior and as worthy of moral consideration compared to some other group like pigs, then I think we need to think about the fact that there are members of our human community who we think are entitled to full moral consideration, but who don't have the quality that we think is so important, or who have it to a lesser degree than an average member of another species like pigs. Pigs are very intelligent.
What is Bill having?
Bill's having a ham sandwich with horseradish, cheese, and some butter to help fatten him up.
It's a community residence. We don't call ourselves group homes. A community of people who live with people with developmental disabilities.
Visiting here, I realized no matter what characteristic we think is unique to humans, a certain level of intelligence, language, the ability to form a social contract, to engage in consensual agreements, to think and act on ethical principles, no matter what criterion we use for believing that our suffering is more important, there will always be some humans who do not have that characteristic. And it's not as if these people are included in ethics under the wire, sort of sneaking in along with the people who actually count. We believe they actually count ethically for their own sake. I wanted to say, but they're human, but that would just leave me to justify trying to draw the line around species membership again. And the more I really thought about it, the more obvious it seemed that ethics really isn't about any of those other characteristics in the first place. That's why disabled humans are included in ethics. What matters would have to be the characteristics that we share.
We share the capacity for joy, the capacity for anger, grief, fear, what your intellectual capabilities are or what your other talents might be. I think we all share some basic needs.
We all suffer, we suffer in different ways.
I must be missing something obvious here, so I decided to get out of my head and just ask around. Do you think that the suffering of humans is more important ethically than the suffering of other animals?
Yes.
And what is it about humans that justifies that?
That we have higher capabilities, that we have equal rights and equal laws and treatment.
Well, what do you mean by higher capabilities?
Mental capabilities.
Well, there are many humans who lack that capability. There are many intellectually disabled humans.
Yes,
we don't exclude them.
I know.
Human beings are more important than animals.
Based on what?
I'm a human being, and I I can relate to human beings more than I can relate to animals.
So if somebody else, so it's because you're a member of this group. So if somebody else said, well, I'm white, so blacks are less important, would that be ethical? So
no, because it doesn't matter what color you are, you're still a human being.
Right, so what is it that's special about human beings? Since you said that the reason is just because you're a member of the group of human beings.
So far, our legal system just represents humans. It doesn't.
Right, and once it's so far represented white men. So the legal system isn't a reason.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
You can talk to us as human beings and get our opinions, and you can't talk to the animals.
Many human beings can't do that either. I mean, there are many intellectually disabled humans, but we still consider them in ethics, so that can't be the basis.
Of course, we got it from.
Yeah.
Conscience.
Like
a right or wrong.
Right or wrong.
You know, most humans typically have that. Right
most?
Yeah.
So the ones that don't, they're like
psychopaths, whatever.
Yeah, or babies.
Yeah, you know,
so
they could be less developed.
They're less important ethically, like their suffering is less important ethically? Babies?
No, because they have the potential.
Oh, okay.
They have the potential.
Right. So intellectually disabled humans who don't have the potential, their suffering would be less important.
No, they wouldn't be less important.
We form societies, we interact all over the world.
But many humans aren't capable of that. So that characteristic doesn't track with being a member of the human species.
The suffering of human beings is more ethically wrong, and I have because I'm biased towards my own species.
You're not biased toward your own race, though, are you?
No.
Okay, just checking.
I'm multiracial. What race could I possibly?
Maybe, I don't know, people who don't have multiple races. Maybe you could bias against them. I don't know. We could make something up. I'm biased against women. You just want to make sure you don't have any of those. It's just species.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking. I can't find a logical reason for speciesism. Why is it then that I just feel like speciesism is justified?
Well, we're trained from very young to think about things in that way.
I refuse to believe that speciesism is wrong. I refuse.
Well, what are you saying? You know, you haven't got a counter argument.
It can't be. It can't be. That would make the world so different. That would make what we're doing to other animals so significant.
Right.
It's impossible that is the case. That what you conclude is the case. There must be something wrong.
Look, put yourself in the position of a slave owner in, Virginia in, let's say, 1800. Such a person in that society could have said something the same about someone who produced arguments that slavery was wrong.
Some people, for example, just knew, without needing reasons, that white people are superior to black people. But some people just knew, without needing reasons. It's a matter of immediate intuition, immediate knowledge that men are superior to women.
In all these cases, you have a dominant group. You have a group that holds power and that defines itself as superior, and that develops an ideology to justify that and to exclude the others.
If we had been having a discussion of slavery in the 1820s, there would be a consensus of opinion that slavery had always existed, that slavery was the natural order of things, that slavery is justified in the Bible, and that slavery is consequently moral. And now, we're 190 years later, and society has diametrically the opposite view about slavery. And what is relatively historically a finger snap, it's a really brief period of time, 200 years in all of history, we now have diametrically the opposite view. What we need to do with animal liberation is get our ethics into line with our science, because we know scientifically, as Dawkins says, that other species are our cousins. We know they feel pain in the same way and to the same degree. And what we're doing to them is a moral atrocity, that is justified in the same way and is similar to past atrocities like slavery.
Happy 200 to Charlie, Chuck, to us, to his close friends. And while you eat it, just remember about his contributions.
I thought biologists might have a special insight, so I stopped by a party for Charles Darwin's 200th birthday, being thrown by my college biology department.
And you can't look at biology without understanding it from a Darwinian perspective. So as a biologist, it has tremendous significance. With the publication of The Origin of the Species and the recognition that there is an evolutionary link all living things, and that basically man was just another animal in that series, had to have an influence on ethics and thinking about other organisms, as well as the relationship of humans to other organisms. It had to have an impact. You can come in and help yourself. Yeah, you don't have to worry about this.
We might extend our basic ethical principles, our opposition to causing harm, for unnecessary reasons to other species. And they might argue doing things like using animals for clothing or for food in ways that cause them suffering is no longer justified in our new understanding of the world. Have you thought of that? No.
I haven't thought of that, actually, no.
Maybe just any biologist won't do, so I stopped by the New York Academy of Sciences Science in the City lecture series when it was hosting the most influential biologist alive.
He's easily the world's leading proponent of that thing we here at Science in the City strive to promote, public understanding of science. Obviously, he needs no introduction.
If you were to walk backwards down through your ancestral tree, starting with your mother, and then your grandmother, great-grandmother, let's just stick to females for convenience, great-great-grandmother, and so on, you would go back and back and back and back and back, go back as far as you like, and gradually the animals that you were walking past, as you walk past your ancestors, would be gradually, ever so slowly changing into something else. By the time you got back to about 6 or 7 million years ago, you would be looking at an animal which was the common ancestor between ourselves and chimpanzees.
Yes, Professor Dawkins, the extraordinary similarities between ourselves and other species that evolutionary biology helps us understand, do you think it has an ethical implication in terms of our treatment of non-human animals? I mean, in my understanding, you are not a speciesist.
I think it does have ethical implications. If you think about the way in which we give special treatment to humans, for example, in the case of abortion, human fetuses are treated as babies. And a lot of people think that it's murder to abort a human fetus, whereas they quite happily go and eat a cow. Which of course has much more capacity to suffer than any human fetus. Chimpanzees, which are pretty close to us, are not given anything like the same ethical, moral, legal protection as humans are. Suppose there were discovered relict populations in the forests of Africa between humans and chimpanzees. What would we do? What would those speciesists do if a live specimen of Lucy, of Australopithecus afarensis, were to be discovered? It's a pure accident that they're extinct. We ought to be able to do something about our morals and our ethics, taking account of the fact that they might not have been extinct. It shouldn't, this major ethical distinction should not depend upon the mere accident of extinction.
When we're very emotionally invested in using other animals, we then sort of decide to have a moral principle that will support that behavior rather than it going the other direction. Right? If we were coming into the world on a clean slate, I don't think the reasons that so-called justify speciesism would persuade us.
What if I could find a way to see the world as a clean slate, to call into question my strongest intuitions and assumptions?
So that's the slit opening up to the sky. Getting the scale of things in the universe is the hardest job for astronomers or anybody who thinks about it. And because they're just so completely unhuman. The distances are so completely outside of any everyday experience that humans have. One way you can think about it, since the distances are so large, is to keep track of how far away objects are by how long it takes light to reach there. Light travels 186,000 miles in 1 second. Light goes around the Earth 7 times in a second. So we've got about 1/7 of 1 second is our whole world here. The sun is 8 light minutes away. So that seems like a pretty incredible distance compared to the Earth. But the distance between stars are just so staggeringly huge that light, even traveling as fast as it does, has to go for years to get to the nearest star. Contained within the Milky Way, inside the region that the Sun orbits, is about 100 billion stars. It takes light 100,000 or more years to go from one side of the Milky Way to the other side. And it's just one fairly typical galaxy. Our little local group of galaxies is on the edge, the outskirts of a fairly impressive cluster of galaxies that has thousands of galaxies. And over 100 million light-year scale, you see that clusters of galaxies are not randomly distributed. They're all bunched up into filaments and sheets and streams. Space is so much larger than even astronomers of just a few generations ago dreamed of. Over and over again, your intuition is wrong. No, it's not like that. Your, quote, common sense has failed you.
What if it really is just a prejudice? What if we're all just here on this planet after 1 billion years of evolution? Could we be just one species, more powerful by luck, tyrannizing over all of the others, and not stepping back to notice what we've been doing all this time? After all, we're capable of it. We've seen it. We are, genetically, no different from the people who engaged in human slave trades for thousands of years, and the civilized societies that took part in genocides.
As a Holocaust survivor, spent my childhood years in the Warsaw Ghetto till late 1942 when we escaped to the other side. After the war, I visited some of the death camps where my family was exterminated. I was struck by the piles of hair and glasses and boots. Years later, I happened to be visiting a slaughterhouse in the United States. And there again, I saw piles of hearts and hooves and other body parts neatly stacked. And then I got to thinking about the highly efficient and dispassionate process that was used in both cases, that the perpetrators felt no guilt about what they were doing, that my fellow Jews were transported in cattle cars. It made me realize that the slogan we've been using, "Never Again," was not really about what others shouldn't do to us.
Oh my God, I saw it. I can't pinpoint some time or moment when I realized that there was something to the argument. So it was a kind of a cumulative process. But once there was a tipping point when you come out on the other side intellectually. It's almost, I would almost say it's crippling. You're immediately confronted with a Holocaust that is occurring everywhere at all times, and everybody you know, your loved ones and people you hate, everywhere, they're all participating in it. And yet here I am, I'm just talking about it, right? I'm kind of somewhat impassionately kind of just talking about it because I'm trying to relay my feelings about it. When really the only reasonable response to that realization, to waking up to this world we live in, is a fucking explosion, right? That's the only reasonable response, because this is something, like, it's never happened before. It's so bad that how do you possibly talk about a Holocaust that's happening everywhere, all the time, every day, and everybody's included? How do you talk about that when no one, it's a laughable subject when you bring it up? You know, when your friends and family, when they think it's cute that you've decided, you know,
you know, that you've taken you've decided to take an interest in the animal issue, but you know, I'm glad you've made your choice. You know, please respect my choice. How in the hell do you possibly go on in that world? Like, how do you not see the world and everybody in it as dark and dangerous and irrational? And how in the world do you not see your life that you've lived up until that point when you've woken up and as inexcusable?
I realized that it goes much deeper than I could have ever expected. For people who try to see past speciesism, the world becomes very different. So, I thought, what are the practical consequences of a non-speciesist view?
In my recent research, I use them to accept human tumors. I use special kinds of mice that don't have normal immune systems so that you could grow human tumors in them. So I can actually look at the response of these experimental therapeutic agents on trying to develop and make sure that these agents really do get to the tumor the way that they're supposed to, and that the tumor grows smaller or goes away. And
is it painful at all for the mice?
I try to make it as painless as possible.
Then we ask the question, would we be willing to do the same experiment on a human being who is at the same level of consciousness? And if the answer is yes, we would do it in the case of the non-human, but no, we wouldn't do it in the case of the human, then that seems to expose a bias in favor of our own species.
Would I put tumors into people to test?
Right.
No.
Why not?
What do you mean, why not?
You do put animals below human beings.
That's right, I do.
Why?
Because they don't make moral choices.
Interestingly, anti-speciesists are not necessarily against all animal experiments. Some ethical theories would allow for the experiments on the unconsenting humans in some circumstances, while others would not. But, at the very least, this thought experiment might help an anti-speciesist decide which experiments are definitely not worth supporting. So, what other things would an anti-speciesist have to start looking at differently? How about another practical issue? The Animal Liberation Front. You know, the people who break into buildings, destroy property, rescue animals, and so on. Dr. Stephen Best at the University of Texas, El Paso studies the Animal Liberation Front.
And the basic idea of the civil disobedience tradition is that if the law is wrong, then the right thing to do is to break it. In the United States, in the 19th century, slavery was legal, and to free a slave from captivity was illegal, but it was the right thing to do. Animals are under attack. They're being tortured and imprisoned and brutalized and slaughtered by millions every day, by billions every year. It's a war. They're under attack. They're being physically manhandled, tortured, caged, shot, electrocuted, and killed in countless ways. It's a war.
I decided to try finding someone who acts on those arguments. So how was federal prison?
Federal prison was something that I spent 7+ years hyping up in my head as being something that was...
What do you mean 7+ years?
Well, I spent 7.5 years as a fugitive. You know, I was wanted by the FBI. So for 7.5 years, I knew one day I was going to go to prison. In 1997, I released thousands of mink from about 6 different fur farms across the Midwest. And what we did is we would show up at these farms in the middle of the night. We would, with bolt cutters or wire cutters, we would strip the fencing away. We would go into these farms. We would open every cage. Farm-raised mink actually survive and thrive in the wild. Any argument against breaking the law to save animals is, at its core, a speciesist argument. Nobody would argue that it is morally unjustified to free slaves.
I realized that by thinking about animal experimentation and the Animal Liberation Front, I was avoiding another topic.
What is the difference between sitting around and watching dogs fight, as he was apparently doing, or allegedly doing, and the rest of us who are sitting around our barbecue pits, charbroiling animals that had been tortured every bit as much as the animals that Michael Vick fights?
Every year, the Church of St. John the Divine in New York has a beautiful St. Francis Day celebration, complete with an animal parade. and transvestites for some reason. Then, hundreds of people line up to get their own companion animals blessed.
I brought him here today to get blessed, and I've been praying to the Lord for a miracle. He has kidney failure. I think it's a miracle that something like dialysis is available for pets. If your aunt or uncle had kidney failure, they would get medical treatment. So I feel the same for animals, companion animals.
Hi, I was wondering if you could do a blessing for all chickens. Yeah, there are too many for me to bring them, so I was wondering if you could do some sort of a blessing for them. I know they're in sheds and cages and so forth. What can I do?
The first thing you should do, if you're opposed to the treatment of animals in factory farms, is to stop supporting it. And as long as you buy the products of factory farms, as long as you consume them, or therefore get other people to buy them for you, that's all the support it needs from you.
So if I'm not going to buy from factory farms, what about all those humane farms I hear about? I found a humane farm that sells to one of the most reputable companies, Whole Foods, and it's described on the Whole Foods website as free range. The owner even took me around.
We're doing things to Whole Foods standards, which are high.
Very high
very high
standards.
Humane standards, and then
the best.
And then also, yeah, I think they have probably, if not the strictest, one of the strictest standards. So we're offering quality products that are raised more naturally for people that are looking for that type of product.
How much space per bird is it in here?
About 3 square foot. Compared to like a regular larger operation, this is a lot of room. To be able to sell the Whole Foods, you got to go through a lot of audits. Oh, it's very strict standards. If you have more than 1% fail rate on your stunning, you fail. If you have more than 1% broken wings, you also would fail the audit.
Actually, this is very mild.
Yeah. It's like my rabbit's box when I haven't cleaned it for a few days.
Yeah. When I'm loading out litter with the skid loader and stirring in it, and that really gets it going, then I'll just wear a respirator, one of those ammonia respirators. That just filters it all out, and because it'll bother your throat.
It does bother your throat.
I mean, it's not good for you.
But here again, like with more space, I mean, our numbers are usually very low. You know, the ammonia levels are usually very low. Turkeys are somewhat, they are like cannibalistic.
So if someone had their own turkeys and had like 3 or 4 of them, they might have that problem?
Probably not. Like we don't get much of that because of the extra room we give them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So because of the extra room, they're not as likely to be cannibalistic.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be as bad.
Why do they grow so much faster now?
Just advances in genetics, selecting the birds that grow faster.
Are there any problems because they grow fast?
Well, yeah, you can get like leg issues in the males, like when they get near market.
Like what?
Or they'll go down on the legs.
This reminded me of something that I had almost forgotten.
She really has difficulty in walking, but she loves people and she loves to be petted. Yeah, her name is Opal. Hi, Opal.
So it took her a while to get used to people again because why?
Well, I think she just didn't trust people, obviously, for a good reason.
She's sort of spreading out her wings? What does that mean?
But she likes to be petted. She's enjoying it. She's going to lay down on top of me.
Where's the wheelbarrow?
That's my cart for ones that don't make it.
It's the cart for ones that don't make it?
Yeah. Every day you might have 1 or 2 or 3. Right. You put 3 or 4 of them in the wheelbarrow, you about got yourself a load.
This is better than a standard farm, and there must be farms much better than this. So are there non-speciesist farms?
If animals are to be in the moral community, then we have to give their interests equal consideration. If animals are property, it becomes impossible to give their interests equal consideration. Think about it for a second. When you are weighing the interests of a piece of property against those of a property owner, you're always going to weigh the interests of property as less than the interests of the property owner. So just as in the case of human slavery, there were all sorts of laws that supposedly protected human slaves, but they didn't work. And they didn't work because you were trying to balance the interests of slaves against the interests of slave owners.
Somehow, I had just never thought about that contradiction between considering the well-being of other animals comparably important to our own well-being, and then using them as economic commodities.
It's also true that if you're eating meat, you're entering into a contract relationship whereby you are paying other people to mutilate animals without pain relief, even on the best farms, to slice animals' throats open without pain relief. You're paying people to abuse animals if you're eating meat. So you can't reconcile those. You can't say, I'm somebody who opposes cruelty to animals, and yet I consider it to be acceptable to pay other people in this mercenary relationship to go out and slit animals' throats for something so inconsequential as a palate preference. It's the ultimate in subjugation. You're literally eating the corpse of another being. It's hard to imagine something more speciesist.
I can't believe I never thought of this before either, but there is something bizarre about eating an animal, eating a corpse. I wonder if people who stop being speciesists start to see eating animals the way all of us see human cannibalism.
Finished product.
Finished product. We had a pig, and they wanted me to cook 2 heads so they could put it on having a big luau.
Oh, luau with the heads.
Right, so we made a couple of heads.
Why is it called blood pudding?
Because there's blood in it.
What does neck taste like? I've never tasted a neck.
It's very tender, it's very flavorful. See, here nobody knows about it. And in Germany, if you go in Germany to a butcher, you got to wait 6 weeks before you can get it.
Really?
Yeah, because
why
you know,
is that? Just
because it's popular. No, that's popular.
Right.
You know.
And there are only so many necks.
Right.
Yeah.
As they're dragged from the sea depths, their eyes pop out of their heads. They literally die from decompression as their bodies explode. Or they end up poured out onto the decks of these massive fish factory farm trawlers, and they're sliced in half while they're still completely conscious. So for so many people who are trying to do vegetarianism incrementally, many of them will cut out red meat first. From a cruelty standpoint, that's hugely counterproductive.
Some argue that we should go even further and become vegan, meaning replace all the animal products in our diets.
In my judgment, veganism ought to be the baseline of the animal movement, because as far as I'm concerned, and I think empirically, there's probably more suffering in a glass of milk or in a dish of ice cream than there is in a pound of steak. I mean, it all involves torture, but I mean, the idea that people make this distinction, they say, well, I don't eat meat, but I eat dairy. I mean, to me, that's about as sensible as saying, well, you know, I don't eat small cows, but I'll eat larger cows. There really is no difference. I mean, you know, there's suffering in the dairy product, probably, you know, as I say, probably more, because if you think about it, animals used in the dairy industry are kept alive longer, they're treated worse.
I never thought of that either. It's almost like we're consuming suffering.
And this is the most horrible pain that any mother can suffer, to have her child taken from her. And this is a routine part of dairying. If you don't absolutely have to do that in order to survive, I just cannot see how anyone can live with themselves and support that.
You can make the decision right now that you're not going to eat animal products anymore.
Well, regardless of whether the vegetarian or vegan arguments are stronger, I thought there must be a good reason not to become either one. I mean, other animals eat other animals.
Suddenly, after putting down animals, they want to say, oh, well, look, if the lion is going to eat the antelope, then it's fine for me to eat the cow. But, you know, I never said that animals are a kind of moral example for us to follow. They're just doing what they have no choice about.
Okay, that one made me feel stupid. I tried to redeem myself.
Animals are at least accidentally harmed in the making of everything, probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. Human beings are accidentally harmed in driving every single day, but nobody is going to say, well, human beings are accidentally harmed, so we should all go take our cars and crash into as many people as we can. We're not, as a society, going to get to a place in which we take those harms seriously if we're still intentionally and gratuitously and for no good reason causing animals to suffer.
And my last-ditch effort.
What about plants?
We don't need to worry about plants as being sentient organisms because they're not. They can't move from one place to another, so evolution didn't equip them with the need to feel pain or feel pleasure to escape something or move towards something else. And also, we understand the fluid mechanics of why a flower tracks the sun across the sky, for instance. We understand that like we understand the workings of a car engine.
So I walked back outside.
What would be a reason you would not want to be vegetarian?
Because I need meat, I need proteins.
Protein.
Yeah.
I became vegan on December 8th, 1995, and eventually gained 75 pounds and became a champion vegan bodybuilder. There's a common misconception relating veganism to weakness or scrawniness or inability to get sufficient nutrition and things like that. But in reality, the primary sources of nutrition, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, complete protein, all these things we need are found in plant-based whole foods, in their primary sources. That is where they come from.
Of course, he's not a doctor.
I was trained as an internal medicine physician, and I've spent the last 18 years working extensively in critical care. The justification that we use for our abuse and mistreatment and exploitation of non-human animals is that we deem them the other, as something less than we are. And being viewed as another is something that I personally am very sensitive to, because as an African American, for a long time, this country viewed us as other. After I became vegetarian and became convinced that, in fact, a plant-based diet was the healthiest diet for human beings, I definitely wanted to spend my life trying to educate people on the fact that they could live healthier, more disease-free, and longer lives.
Okay. So what else have we got?
It's the same thing over and over.
Yeah, can you explain them? So how vegetarian food is boring, like it's bland?
It's bland, I mean, it can be blander. It's not as much a variety.
This is Francia, a vegan restaurant in Manhattan.
I'm Terry Choi, the owner of this restaurant, and I've been a vegan for more than 15 years. Soy chicken sticks has batter on the chicken and is slightly fried. We dip the chicken in a barbecue sauce and yum. This is our lobster ball sticks. The texture of the lobster ball is very similar to an actual lobster. This is our cheesecake. Everybody loves the cheesecake. It's totally non-dairy. We get comments like, oh my God, this is a vegan cheesecake. We didn't know that it tastes, even better than the real cheesecake.
People really say, oh my
yes.
God?
So we decided to test that proposition.
It's lobster.
Is that what it is?
It's vegetarian lobster. It's not really lobster.
No, it is real.
Can I have the rest of it?
If you go to the supermarkets like Whole Foods or some of the health stores, you can get soy sausages, you can get soy meat. If you go to the bookstore like Barnes & Nobles, there's a whole shelf lined with vegetarian cooking.
Remember Paul Shapiro from the Humane Society? He showed me some vegan versions of my favorite foods in his kitchen.
Becoming vegan isn't about overhauling our lives in some type of a dramatic fashion. It's just about making some simple food choices. Look, I mean, I'm still a person who likes to go running, like to lift weights, to play football. Some of them taste, I think, pretty much identical to regular animal meat, and some of them don't. But the key isn't to actually mimic the taste of it. If we've been brought up eating these vegan meats and then we ate animal-based meats, we say, oh, that doesn't really taste the same. We're not talking about really major sacrifices here. I mean, the biggest problem that you might have is if your friends want to go to some restaurant that may not have a lot of vegan options and you end up getting, pasta or salad or whatever, whatever, you know, big deal. It is just as easy to go pick up these vegan meat products from places like Publix as it is to go to Publix and get the regular animal meat products. Or if you want, you can get even more options when you go to health food stores like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, which are just as easy to go to as places like Publix.
So what exactly is my excuse for buying the animal products?
You know, we're all, well, it's essentially habit. I mean, we've been accustomed to eating these products for so long that it becomes normal for us. But just because something has been habituated doesn't mean that we have to keep on doing it for the rest of our lives.
If you lived during the time of human slavery, do you think you would be an abolitionist, or do you think you would probably go with the majority and support slavery?
I would probably be an abolitionist.
Would you be an abolitionist, do you think?
I would hope so.
Within the last 4 years, I've had the chance to leaflet at, I think, around 300 colleges and hand out maybe 350,000 booklets so far. I'm trying to think of a way that doesn't make this seem as I'm boasting. It's pretty much on a daily basis that one of our leafleters or a few of our leafleters are coming across individuals who say something to the extent of, hey, I got a booklet from you a year ago, I haven't eaten meat, I've been vegan since then.
Animal advocates are changing the culture. PETA alone last year gave away more than 850,000 of our vegetarian starter kit brochure and millions of vegetarian leaflets. And we had more than 1 million people on our website alone watching the Meet Your Meat video.
Is this stuff effective?
It's fantastically effective. When we poll people about why they adopted a vegetarian diet, these days the #1 reason is people who watched Meet Your Meat.
When Vegan Outreach started our college outreach program, we handed out 80,000 booklets our first year. 7 years later, and we are distributing more than 1 million booklets every single year.
A million?
Yeah, so we've seen more than a tenfold increase within just the last 7 years, and these booklets are having a huge impact on the college students.
As a conservative estimate, if we have 1 million vegans now, we have a lot more than that. If each of those people convinces just one more person to go vegan in 5 years, and most of us are convincing a lot more than that, you know, we'd have 2 million vegans in 5 years. 4 million vegans in 10 years, 8 million vegans in 15 years.
The amount of vegetarian and vegan options is going to only increase dramatically. It's going to make it easier and easier and easier for more and more people.
You walk into Whole Foods and where, 10 years ago they had a few vegan options, now they have entire vegan sections. And Burger King has a veggie burger.
Do you think there's going to be a tipping point?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty much inevitable at some point we're going to have a serious social discussion about the ethics of raising and killing animals for food.
We are making lightning speed progress by comparison to past social justice movements. And we as a species can only continue to deny science for so long. We can only continue to live so far outside of our own principles for so long. We will get to animal liberation.
But there's something else. The treatment of animals we've been talking about have been the standard legal practices, but it goes beyond that, and it might go way beyond that very often.
We've done dozens of undercover investigations from coast to coast. Time and again, we find filthy conditions, animals that are being neglected to die without veterinary care, and just rampant physical abuse on factory farms. Every time that we send investigators into egg factory farms, we find birds that are trapped or mangled in the wire of their cages. Loose wire will actually penetrate the skin of these birds and start to rip their skin off. The birds oftentimes will die in those conditions, and then their bodies will be left to rot in the cages with the birds that are still producing eggs for human consumption. We've done dairy farm investigations where there's so much manure that the cows are slipping on their own feces. We've also found mother pigs who have untreated injuries, everything from broken bones to open wounds. This is something that the industry would like people to believe is isolated or an aberration, but we know that this is just part of doing business for factory farms.
There was one last thing I had to do. Something that I never thought I would find myself doing. I had to speak with some of the most respectable, ethically committed people out there to find out if they could be wrong about one thing.
Well, we're a leading human rights organization under Jewish auspices, but we use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate people against the dangers of bigotry in general, as well as indifference, apathy.
What's the problem with making these comparisons between the Holocaust and animals?
Well, it
There are probably a
puts...
lot of problems.
There are many, many difficulties that are involved. Number one, it tends to put human beings and animals on the same level.
How did we pick species membership as the moral dividing line rather than humans with those
We don't have to
capacities?
go that far.
Right.
We just say there are humans and then there's everything else.
Okay.
I realized he was a regular speciesist, so I dropped the topic of the value of non-human animal suffering, and I went on to the real reason I was there.
Wouldn't you agree that, for example, beating up a dog causes the dog more suffering than, like, slapping, you know, a little slap on a human?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so I mean,
Sure.
we could, so a lot of these people say, well, if we can make some sort of comparison, they say that the suffering of animals on factory farms today, you know, billions of birds and pigs and so forth who are suffering for their entire lives physically and psychologically and so forth, regardless of whether or not the suffering is more important, just as a basically factual matter, is more suffering than what took place in the Holocaust.
No.
That can't be.
It's ridiculous. And if animal rights advocates and others wanted to make a point that others would listen to,
But why
the
is that
majority,
ridiculous? Let's show why it's ridiculous. Why
you
is
do
that
not
so
come
obvious?
because it's also a comparison of animal suffering to human
But if
suffering.
we didn't compare the value, if they just say, just as a practical matter, there's more suffering going on because they're suffering intensely for their entire lives, and there are billions of them, and there were several million people who suffered in the Holocaust, but there were more who are suffering.
Can you
intensely
compare
for
the
their entire
suffering
lives.
of a female pig who has a piglet taken away to the suffering of a woman or a man who has a baby taken away by the Nazis and killed?
Well,
You can't.
Right.
I don't think you
Right.
can. I don't care
Actually-
how... Pigs are supposedly very, very intelligent, but I don't think they have that same feeling.
Well, if that's what it is, though, for example, mother pigs spend their lives in crates that are, you know, 7 feet long by 2 feet wide. They go crazy and bang their heads against the sides and chew on the bars constantly, and they're mutilated. You know,
But you still do not compare...
But they're suffering for their entire lives, and there are millions of them. So they say, forget how valuable the suffering is. There's more suffering going on there. Or
I don't know. I mean,
Then
I really don't know.
When I walk out onto these same streets, they look different. And I think they always will. But now you know too. And you're going to walk out onto these streets. Could speciesism be the greatest hurdle that has ever faced humankind? Could this be the ultimate choice? To pretend we never learned this? Or to take responsibility for ourselves? I do not know the answers to these questions. But this film isn't meant to provide the answers. It's meant to provide the questions. Because it's not up to me. It's up to you.